What happens when a childhood tragedy turns into a lifelong mission? And that mission inspires the next generation to walk into the courtroom. A tornado on February 22nd, 1975 destroyed Ty Smith's family home. The insurance denial left his family homeless. That moment became the foundation for 222 Injury Lawyers, a firm built on fighting for everyday Oklahomans and a legacy fueled by purpose. Welcome back to the Legal Lead Shark podcast, where high-growth law firms and the marketers who power them come to sharpen their edge. If you're obsessed with leads, conversions, and building a law firm that dominates your market, you're in the right place. We go deep into the top minds of legal marketing, from agency owners and tech founders to intake pros and PPC legends, and the next generation law firm owners who are making waves, uncovering the strategies, tools, and mindset to turn more clicks into signed cases. I'm your host, Kaylee Terrazas, and today's guests, Ty, Sheldon, and Bailey of 222 Injury Lawyers out of Oklahoma, are here to share how childhood tragedy turned into a family legacy. Before we get into the story behind the name, if you guys will give a quick introduction, just kind of who you are and what you do at the firm.
I'm Ty Smith, and I am one of the partners, and try to kind of lend my experience to my children to help us find our way.
I'm Sheldon Smith. I'm a trial attorney, and I manage our Tulsa office.
I'm Bailey Smith-Londigan, and I head our Oklahoma City office that we are building out now, and I do litigation and kind of handle some of the marketing for us.
So Ty, I want to start with you. You've got a pretty powerful origin story on why you came into personal injury law. Can you take us back to the moment that you wanted to become a personal injury lawyer?
Well, probably what inspired that moment, and I don't know when the exact moment was, but I know what inspired it, and what's kind of pushed me all these years to continue to do what I do, is that, as you mentioned, on February 22nd, 1975, I was 7 years old at the time. My family had just bought a new trailer house that we were going to move into out in southern Oklahoma. We'd been there probably 2 weeks, and my mother had taken me and my sister to Oklahoma City to stay with my other sister, which left my dad and my brother there at the new trailer house. And middle of the night, my dad wakes up, hears the storm, grabs my brother, runs out of the trailer, jumps in the truck, takes off. And they come back the next day, and everything's been completely destroyed, and it's just an absolute mess. And so my dad turned it into the insurance company, and the insurance company promptly denied it. And, my family didn't have a lot to start with, and so there wasn't any extra. And so that put us in a real bind and basically left us homeless. And, I can remember being 7 years old at the time. I can remember vividly living in a barn for a good amount of time and waking up at night and seeing the rats run across the rafters and stuff. And it just, at the time, I don't know that I knew what it was motivating me to do, but I knew that it left me with a very bad taste in my mouth for insurance companies, and the position that the way they handled our situation put my family in at that time. And it just so happened that when that tornado hit, back then everybody had electric clocks. And so there were hands on the clocks. And when my family went out to the trailer house to clean up, all of the clocks in the house were stopped at 2:22 in the morning. And as a child, that just always stuck in my head. February the 22nd at 2:22 a.m. And so my whole life, that's just been something that's, when I tell people that story, that's what I always tell them. It was 2:22. And so when we started talking about forming our own firm as a family, our last name's Smith. There's not a lot to work with there. And so we looked at every possible scenario of how to play the Smith and couldn't figure out a good way of doing it, and started just looking for other options. And it just kind of dawned on me one day that, what started all of this was 222. And maybe there was a way to parlay that into a meaningful story that would not only be meaningful to us, but translate to our clients. And so I pitched it to Sheldon and Bailey, and they loved it. And so we ran with it. Here we are. And, we feel like it really defines who we are. We're passionate about what we do. Our theme is that we sue insurance companies, and that's the drum we beat every day.
So that's really interesting. And I'm a big believer. I was talking to Bailey before we started. I'm a big believer in words hold power. Named my kids, their names based on meaning, because I think there's a lot of power behind our words. I also believe in synchronicities of numbers and stuff. And I knew that 222 was the number of angels, but I kind of forgotten. I'm not a big numerology person. So I looked it up right before the podcast because I was like, that's interesting. I want to see, where this correlates with your story. story. And the number 2 means balance, harmony, partnership, intuition, and diplomacy, which I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then when you put those 3 together, it amplifies the meaning, suggesting trust, balance, and positive new beginnings, which again, I feel like just plays right into the storyline of what you guys do and working out of such a place of compassion that you felt the after effect of someone fighting for you guys and what it means when insurance companies don't do right by people. So I had to add that in there, and it gives me goosebumps because I thought, wow, diplomacy's even in the number 2. And then you put those together and it means trust and new beginnings, which I think is what you guys help people do. I have so much, respect for personal injury lawyers. You guys take on a lot of risk in taking on cases that if you don't win, you don't get paid. And so you've got as much on the line as they do. And I know you guys fight so hard for them to get justice. So there's tremendous amount of respect. So tell me a little bit about, when did you realize that Sheldon and Bailey were serious about following in your footsteps and kind of making this a legacy law firm for your family?
I wish there was a really inspiring story to tell here, but it was really just circumstantial. Growing up, I just I never tried to push them to be lawyers. They're both smart kids. I just wanted, just for them to find their own way. And Sheldon went into electrical and computer engineering, got his degree in that. Bailey went into hospitality management, had big plans to go into the wedding industry after graduating. And, circumstantially, startup firm that Sheldon went to work for, the owners of it, unfortunately, passed away in a car wreck. And it kind of left him in a little bit of a decision-making point in his life. And he decided he wanted to go to law school. And so that's really when I found out, is, when he called and said, hey, I just think I want to go to law school. I want to do something that's going to make more of a difference in people's lives than, software engineering, feel like that's doing. And then Bailey was just circumstantially, we had always knew that she had traits that would make her a great lawyer, but she never really expressed much interest in it. And when you graduate from college with a degree in hospitality management in May of 2020, there's not a lot of weddings to plan. That was right on the cusp of the pandemic. And, we just had a conversation and just decided that you can't go wrong going to law school. If you decide you want to do that when you're out, great. If you don't, it'll help you in your wedding business. Whatever you want to do, explore that as an option. So she jumped right on it, took the LSAT, got accepted to law school, and here we are.
Nice. Sheldon, you want to add to that? Was there any point, I know your dad said you just wanted to make a difference in people's lives. Kind of tell us a little bit about how that progression happened for you to want to follow in your dad's footsteps.
Yeah, I think before I went to law school, like Ty said, my dad said I was a software engineer. And so I spent a lot of time in front of a computer screen and I enjoyed it. It's like solving puzzles all day, but just felt like I wanted to do something more. And growing up, I was an athlete. I played football in college and just kind of always had a little bit of a drive to want to push. And I felt like going into law, and especially doing personal injury law and kind of the David versus Goliath kind of fights that we get in, of feeling like we're the little guy going against an insurance company, just, fit well into things that motivated me. It's like, I think I can really find a lot of motivation in the kind of work that we're doing as a lawyer. And so guided me along this path.
Yep. I was telling you guys earlier, I did an interview with another second generation personal injury lawyer out of DFW, and he said the same thing. He actually started on the other side defending the insurance companies and then saw how bad the plaintiff side was. And some of these people should have got claims like you, Ty, like your family, it sounds like. And then just due to negligence pretty much on the lawyer's side, he couldn't stand it. He's like, these are people that need, if they deserve compensation, they need compensation. So he kind of flipped the script, but he said, man, the insurance company has painted a really ugly narrative of us as personal injury lawyers that we still need to switch on, because they are the big guy, they're the David versus Goliath. They have the money to put behind those narratives. So it makes sense. Bailey, how about you? Tell us a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, so with hospitality management, I, like Ty said, graduated during COVID, decided okay, I'm going to go to law school. And while I was in law school, I still didn't really know which area I wanted to go into, what I wanted to do. I thought, well, maybe I'll do, entertainment law or something like that. But I knew I wanted to stay in Oklahoma, and there's not a ton of opportunities for entertainment law in Oklahoma. And so I kind of, wanted to do my own thing and figure out exactly what I wanted to do and try different areas of the law. And ultimately, if I decided personal injury was what I wanted to do, then that's what I wanted to do. But I wanted to make sure I exhausted all of my options first to see what else was out there, because I grew up knowing personal injury law. And other than that, I didn't really know what else was out there. So I interned at a couple places, and one was a personal injury firm. And when I really got to thinking about, why I went to law school and what motivates me, planning events was what I knew. And usually when I'm planning a wedding or something like that, I'm meeting people where they are for one of the, happiest times of their lives. And we plan the whole thing. We think of plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and have to have a bird's eye view, but see all the small details. And so when I started thinking about personal injury law and how I could take what I had and correlate that with the legal world, I realized there are actually a lot of similarities if you think about it. So you've got, a car wreck or a tragedy or a death, and you're meeting someone in one of the toughest places they've ever had in their life. And you've got to see the full picture and plan for plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. But not only do you have to see how everything fits in the big picture, but you have to see how all of the small details and making sure all these things get done happen. I realized actually I'm not too far off from my background of what I've been doing. And it was just when we started thinking about, the idea of the three of us having this passion for law that we could share together and these different strengths that we all have coming together and forming a firm together was ultimately what seemed like the most exciting and best way to go about doing good work together.
That leads me perfectly into my next question, which is how do you guys balance the family dynamic of running a law firm together, especially when some of the times the stakes are really high?
Yeah, I think that I guess I can go first. I think we do a great job. We all have a lot of different strengths, but I think we all together, Ty is great. He's got the experience and the knowledge to instill in us of how to be good attorneys and how to ultimately be good people. And he's incredibly smart. And so he has a little bit more of an analytical mind and brain and can see numbers and those kinds of things. And then, I've obviously got kind of a hospitality mind and more creative and marketing. And so I think we just all really well together and kind of play into each other's strengths. Certainly has been, it brings a different dynamic to your family when you work together because it's like, hey, this is all we talk about. This is all we do. We have other people in our family, like our spouses, who are like, kind of think it's interesting to hear about this, but I don't want to hear about it all the time. And so, it adds a different dynamic, certainly. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what I've appreciated is that we're all on the same playing field and working towards a common goal. And so we can all get there together. There's no we're not competing against each other because we're all related. And that's just not really how we operate. And so it's been, in my mind, it's been very nice because we're all just pushing forward in the same manner, but we have a lot of different strengths that complement each other well. And so it is different, but I prefer it over anything else. That's my perspective.
Yeah. How about you, Ty, Sheldon? What do you guys have to add?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's a reflection of the way that we were raised, of having similar values in the way that we were raised. And, something I've heard my dad say a long time about the work that we're doing is, if insurance companies would treat people fair, we'd be out of business. And I think that's kind of our motivation for why we do what we do is people need to treat people fairly. And I think that that's how we treat each other when we run the firm too, is we need to treat each other fairly. Like those values that we have from growing up are the way that we treat each other day to day. And that's how we're able to get along. That's how we're able to fight the fights that we fight for our clients, is because things like fairness matter a lot. And so those kind of carry through in the running of the firm and the way we handle our cases.
Yeah, there's, when considering going down this road with Sheldon and Bailey and starting a family firm, I had lawyers tell me, boy, you better be careful. I tried to do that and I don't speak to my children anymore. It just completely ruined our family. And that never crossed my mind. It really never did. And I guess just because we get along so well, we respect each other. To me, that's the key to it. It's a mutual respect. Yes, I'm the dad. I'm the one with the experience. But for instance, Sheldon, when we started the firm, I said, all right, Sheldon, I want this firm to be 21st century technology. I want it to be as advanced thinking as it can be. Let's do everything as efficiently as we possibly can. You do it. I trust you. And so the way he trusts me to tell him, how do you get from here to there on a lawsuit? I trust him to figure out how the firm is going to run from a technology standpoint. Same with Bailey with marketing and other aspects of the firm. And it's just, I feel very fortunate to have children. I know respect me. And, when I talk to them, I see a lot of families that interact where the children kind of put out with their parents or whatever, tired of listening to them or whatever. I never feel that way with my kids. And I try to make them never feel like that, you don't know what you're talking about. Just be quiet. I worked for another law firm for 30 years. From the time I graduated law school to the time, literally the day I left that law firm, I said, I'm leaving and I'm starting a firm with my kids tomorrow. It was the largest advertising firm in Oklahoma. And I gained a lot of experience there. But also, it was a family firm. And I saw a lot of interaction between the father and the children there. And most of it was very positive. But there were some things I observed that I thought, there's a better way of doing this. And so I've just tried to always be more respectful to my children than I don't want anybody to ever criticize me for not respecting their thoughts. Just because I've done it a long time doesn't mean there's not a better way of doing it. And I tell them that all the time. Hey, here's how I would do it, but that doesn't mean it's the best way. Things have changed. Practice laws changed. Technology's changed. Strategies have changed. Y'all go out and build yourself as a lawyer around what you think is going to work, and then we'll mesh it all together and make it work out as best as we can.
Yeah, I 100% back that. As a parent that has a legal lead shark in training under me for many years, since 2016, I've had my digital marketing firm, but I ran it really small because I homeschooled my boys, and I've always taken that approach. When I was a kid, the worst thing to hear when I asked a question was because I said so. And it wasn't ever me trying to question authority of my parents. I was just curious of why, So as a parent, I never said because I said so. I always gave them an explanation. And I had a friend of mine, an older person, kids were already grown and graduated, that was kind of, I guess, had their opinions about how I was handling that. And she said, you should never explain this to your children. And I thought to myself two things. One, I've always taught my kids, not everybody's good at everything. If you're taking marriage advice, make sure it's from someone who has the kind of marriage you want to have. If you're taking money advice, make sure it's from somebody that has a lot of money and, and they may have an amazing marriage, but don't take money advice from that person or whatever the case is. And I've told them, even when it comes to me, I take your approach, Ty. This is the way I would do it, but how would you do it? Let's talk through it, or here's why. So a mutual respect. And I think that I agree with you. I see where a lot of people probably shouldn't go into business together as a family. And that's not because family and business shouldn't mix. It's because there's not a level of respect between each other. It's more of an authoritative position or a dictatorship. And that's not going to work, that everybody wants to be seen as an independent. So I love how you guys have merged all of your strengths together and you can lean on each other for different things that you're good at. And I'm same way with my son, 17, he graduated early, and same thing with him. I'm like, here's the AI world. Let's go dominate this. And you're on your games and stuff all the time. Let's put that towards something, and I'm going to lean on you for that. So I really love to hear that. And I love to see what you guys are doing. So Ty, quick question for you. You've had a very long career in personal injury already. What are some things that have changed over the last 10 to 20 years? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but what have you seen in the personal injury space that's adapting, evolving, or changing?
Well, it's not getting any easier. Every day, it's more complicated, primarily in getting a case actually resolved. What I mean by that is, yes, when I first started, you could settle a case today and have the check tomorrow and disperse the funds the next day. And now when you settle a case, that's just the first in about 20 steps that you have to take to actually hand the client their check, because the law has changed so much with regard to lien holders' rights. And so when you settle a case, you have to check for, did they have health insurance? If they did it pay the bills? If so, did they have rights of reimbursement? If so, how strong are those? And then you have to deal with them. Then you have to look at physicians' liens and see if those are, and you have to check and see if your client has any tax liens. Then you have to see if your client has any child support liens. Then it's on and on and on. And so it literally takes longer to get a case from the time where we say we accept your offer till the time where we disperse the funds than it to the offer. It's just, so that to me is the biggest thing that has changed. It's just really kind of slowed down how fast we can move. And it's frustrating to the clients. It's frustrating to us, but it's just the way the law has developed. And so there's all these hands out there when you get money that's saying, hey, we want that. We've got a right to it. And as a lawyer, we have an ethical obligation to make sure that anybody who has a claim to money that comes to one of our clients, that we respect that right. We put them on notice and we make sure that their claim claim is resolved one way or the other. We can't just to give that money to our client and say, to heck with you, or else we've committed an ethical violation and we're civilly liable to pay that person. And because our client's now got the money and probably doesn't have it anymore. So they're going to look for, who can actually pay me on this? And they're going to come to us. So that's what I would say is single biggest change that I have seen.
Yeah. So when I started really going deep into marketing for law firms 3 years ago, I realized I just had my first personal injury client come on with us. It was a friend that was referred to us. And I was like, I love this game. This is very competitive. It's very fast moving. And I guess the athlete in me, like you, Sheldon, really was like, whoa, this is fun. And I like working with attorneys, but I knew there was a lot I didn't know about law. So I started reading all these law firm books, how to fireproof, how to grow and scale your law firm, what they don't teach you in law school, which people laugh at me. They're like, do you do marketing or do you run a law firm? I'm like, at this point, I need to partner up with some lawyers. I feel like I halfway know how to run a law firm at this. I don't know anything about the law, but I know all the other stuff. One of the things that I read in Mike Morris's book, Mike Morris, big PI guy, almost famous at this point in Detroit. I loved his book, and it was co-authored with his COO, which I also love that he realized he was trying to wear all the hats in his firm. He was processing payroll. He was running, he's doing multiple millions, had a small team, but he couldn't scale. He hit a ceiling and he couldn't figure out what it was. Hired a business coach. Long story short, the business coach said, you're the visionary. You need an integrator. You don't know anything about your numbers. It's like watching a basketball game with no scoreboard. You have no idea what's going on. He gets his integrator, his COO in there, who still is COO to this day. And man, they just blew up. And so that's the power of getting the right people in the right places. But one thing I learned in that book that I really didn't know, especially about personal injury specific, is, and he kind of said it like this, so I'll just piggyback off him. A lot of times it's you're cash rich or you're paper rich, cash poor. And it's because those settlements can take 1 year to 3 years to settle and pay out. So this is an impromptu question for you guys, but how do you navigate that? Because it is a huge, I've had a wealth management strategist, Frank Reckes, who was talking about the Rockefeller method for law firms. Brilliant way to have asset, to be able to tap into your own, I call it personal bank, but he didn't like that. He said that's got a bad rep. So I'm like, okay, private funds or however you want to say it. But yeah, how do you guys navigate around those settlements that can take a while and people are, they got medical bills piling up. They're potentially going to lose their home. They've lost their jobs because of injuries. How do you help your clients navigate, or how do you as the firm navigate around that huge timeline now?
I defer to Sheldon on that because when we formed this, I told him, I said, look, there's a lot of things that I know how to do. There's some things that I'm probably not that knowledgeable of. And one of the things, management side of especially the economics, that part of the firm. And so, Sheldon loves to read and set his mind to it. And so I'll let him kind of explain where we're at on that.
Yeah. And particularly in the lens of how we do it as a firm, like you mentioned, Fireproof, read that really helpful book. Another book that we use a lot is the Profit First method for how to turn a profit as a firm. But it is a reality of the business that there's a little bit of uncertainty, a lot of bit of uncertainty on when is a case going to settle? How much is it going to settle for? And like Ty was mentioning, even once you settle it, how long is it going to take before you get paid? Sometimes there's things you don't know about till you get to the end. You're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to get this in a month and it's going to be 6 months. And so at least for us, we tend to be pretty conservative in our finances and trying to plan ahead and trying to, from the get-go of a case, start projecting, when do we think this case is going to settle? What do we think it's going to settle for? Try to update that throughout it so that way we can look at a model throughout the year. What does it look like? Okay, so we can start to the very best of our ability, start making educated decisions of, well, it looks like this is how the year is going to look. This is how much this case is going to cost, and try to make the most educated guess that we can of how to weather that storm. But it's a reality of it. Sometimes there's just droughts that are unexpected. So for us, we just try to plan ahead for those to get through them. On the other side of it, on the client side of it, it's in my opinion, one of the most difficult conversations at times with clients of when they're in a dire strait. And the reality from our side of the table is very rarely can I get you a check tomorrow. I might be able to get you a check for tomorrow, but it comes with a very high price of probably not being the check that I could get you 6 months from now. And it makes it incredibly difficult at times when people are really struggling. How do we bridge that gap? There's tools that we can use to try and get there, but it's a grim reality sometimes that the money's not there when you need it. And so that's why we try to be as efficient as we can to get to that point as quickly as possible. So when we get there, it's as soon as we can get there and as good of as much compensation as we can get for the client.
Yeah. So you're the integrator then, Sheldon, huh? That it worked out perfectly, it sounds like, because without an integrator, most firms, and I think that is honestly most people who are bold enough to step out and start a firm, they're the visionary, right? They're willing to jump off the cliff and build the plane on the way down. But unless you quickly get somebody that's an integrator, which Ty, like hats off to you for realizing and being, again, like I'm not the kind of person that's like, I leave the ego at the door. I don't know what I don't know. I'm like, guys, help me. Like, where's my blind spot? So I'm an avid reader. I've read Profit First, great book. And my husband's my integrator and he's part of the team because, I joke that we're handcuffed together and I jumped off the cliff and I was like, okay, start building the plane. And he's like, ah. But I recently interviewed Laura Moore of Moore Injury Funding out of Georgia. If you guys ever need contact information, she helps the case side and the plaintiff side to be able to get injury funding within 24 to 48 hours. And I had her on after reading the book and realizing, oh, this is a big problem. I had no idea because, again, I'm on the other side. I'm on the marketing side. I had no idea this was such a big issue. I felt like if the money's there, it should be there, but it's not anymore. So if you guys ever want to reach out to her or anybody ever needs her, she's really good at her job. And she built More Injury Funding out of being a personal injury victim herself, having really bad injuries. She ended up losing her job. She had a lot of mental and physical things to recover from and ended up getting the settlement, but almost lost her home. And she just was like, this is not okay. Like, this process is not okay for people to, potentially lose everything in waiting for something to happen. So that leads me a little bit, Bailey, into marketing. I think you're the marketing one. Personal injury, again, you guys with marketing, as a marketing standpoint, you guys, not only do you need to know your numbers, Sheldon, for the operator's position, right? Because that's going to either make or break the firm. But in marketing, my Google Ads mentor always says the people who know their numbers win, whether it's from your COO side or your CMO side as far as your marketing goes. So Bailey, tell me a little bit about how you guys overcome the really big hurdle you have of hopefully you're having a one-off client. Hopefully, fingers crossed, they don't need your services again. But how do you guys, operate as far as marketing and keeping new leads coming in?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. Just the, kind of the legacy that Ty has created for himself and allowing us to reap the benefits of, word of mouth is a very, very strong lead generation for us. And, past clients or friends or family that we've been connected to will reach out and say, hey, can you help us? This is kind of our issue. And so we feel very fortunate that we have those relationships that people do trust us to call us, and then Sheldon and myself kind of on our own, building our own network, getting involved and just, trying to kind of change the narrative and the bad rap that people have in their minds of personal injury lawyers. I think when people see us and talk to us and interact with us, they are like, oh, that's not what I thought personal injury lawyers were like. I thought that they were, these terrible people are just money hungry and, trying to take advantage of people or, stuff like that. And so I think we do have a lot of weight just in our, kind of our firm culture and how we operate. And that serves us very well in our marketing that fortunately so far has been, pretty slim just from the work and the legacy that we've done so far. Sheldon knows a bit more. We try to get involved in local communities and do a bit more intentional things, and that's been helpful as well. We've tried some SEO companies that I will say it is hard as a personal injury attorney because there are so many lead generation and SEO companies out there and they're all very expensive and it's hard to know which one to go with and which one to go to. We've been burnt before by lead generation companies and SEO companies. You don't know what you don't know. So you're paying all this money. Is this what's supposed to happen or is this not? We're a new business. Do we just wait? And then, we made the switch to a different SEO company and results don't happen overnight, but almost overnight we saw an immediate difference. And so there definitely are mistakes that can be made and just tell you kind of hear somebody that has done the same thing. I think it's hard to with personal injury because the the market is so saturated and there is so much competition to, get those leads and get those signups that, the transparency of, I don't know if I want to do the same marketing that, the firm across the street is doing or the firm, over there is doing, because we all need kind of different strategies, but you want to hear from someone that's had a good experience with good strategies. Obviously you can advertise on TV and do the billboards, but, times are changing. Is that the way that you need to market now? And so it's a continual conversation that we have amongst ourselves and among the firm of, okay, what's the direction we're going with our marketing? What are we doing? But fortunately, we have been very lucky to keep a steady stream of really word of mouth, warm referrals of trusted individuals who may feel honored that, they call us when they need us because they trust us.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. And I don't usually share this part of the story because I like to be more positive and upbeat and things. But my husband actually worked for one of these really bad firms, I will say agencies as far as marketing goes. And within the first month he got there, he was like, shoot, this was not the right move. And we were looking for the exit strategy, but he was the account director over a very large marketing agency who was selling basically, and I know you can't say this, I'm just going to say sign cases, but they're selling leads or whatever, however you want to call it. They're running the marketing and you pay X amount of dollars and you get a lead to your firm and it's supposed to be guaranteed or whatever. He got in there and it didn't take him, like I said, 2 seconds to figure out what the problem was. And also to say, I want out like ASAP because I'm not going down with this boat. But it was horrendous to hear some of the law firms had lost $250,000 with no return and were tied up in litigation with this company because a really good contract that I'm not sure I guess you would think lawyers would read it with a fine tooth comb. I'm not sure how they missed some of it, but man, they did. And it was just not morally or ethically right. And actually one of the people, when he left immediately, pretty much after getting in there, is the first personal injury client that I got because he said, I need marketing, but I need someone I can trust. And I said, well, I've done a lot of marketing for service-based businesses. I can try, I'm not going to promise anything, and that's what launched me into getting into the industry. And then it didn't, of course, take me long to hear, just like you guys have a new narrative to paint. I'm like, holy, marketing agencies have developed the same black eye amongst lawyers for being really shady and coming in and saying, I can do all the things for you and not doing it. So it's expensive. I have consulted with a lot of personal injury firms that I said, you're not ready yet. Like just to step on the court of Google Ads is this much, for your market. But let's come back to that. But here's what you can do right now, right? Do everybody in your market, do the people you went to high school and college with know that you're personal injury lawyers? Most of them are like, no. Okay, well, that's free. Let's start there, and then we build up to being able to compete. But it is, Google knows the kind of settlement money that you guys get. And that's why the clicks are anywhere from $50 to $500. And that's not even a conversion. That's just for the clicks. So it's a cutthroat game all the way around for you guys. And I get it. It's hard. It's a tough marketing for sure. So what advice, Ty, this will be our last question before our pop quiz question at the end, our little fun one. What advice would you give the next generation lawyers? They want to build a legacy firm. Maybe they've got kids that are interested in law. And like you said, for a long time, you worked under a firm and stepping out, I'm sure it was a big change for you. So what would you give lawyers who are wanting to make a legacy out of their law practice like you have?
Probably I'm a really simple guy. And so to me, it all kind of comes down to simple statements and simple concepts. From the time I can remember, I just constantly remember my mother saying, you catch more flies with sugar than you do vinegar. And she just always preached, be nice, be nice, be nice. There's no reason not to be nice to people. And that's just who I am. It's hard for me not to be nice to people. And I really get a lot of satisfaction out of being nice to people. One of my biggest compliments that I ever get is, I would have never guessed you were a personal injury lawyer. Because I know that there's an image. I know that there's a kind of a expectation there. And, I just try to be different. And so it may be oversimplifying it, but at the end of the day, that's what's worked for me is just be honest with people, be down to earth, be nice. I can't tell you how many cases that I've got over the years from somebody calls in and they've got some really complex situation that I can't even begin to help them with, but I'll spend 30 minutes on the phone with them and just kind of try to, hold their hand and say, I really really can't help you, but I think this person might be able to or whatever. And, and then a year later, you get a call from somebody that says, hey, a friend of mine called and, they told me that they called and you weren't able to help them, but they sure appreciated the time you spent with them and that I ought to call you. And so it's just stuff like that. I mean, I just think that you can never be too nice, and it will never, the dividends that it pays of just being nice to people, there's just no substitute for it. And I think that it's just a lot of personal injury lawyers that go about it differently with, flashy ads and different things, but that's just really not my style. And so for me, it's just simple. Be nice, be honest, everything else fall in line.
Yeah. Google recently said at their SEO conference in New York, they were basically, the undertone of that was, we have no idea what's happening with AI, so build a personal brand. And so now more than ever, it's so important to be able to differentiate yourself and be able to change the narrative in that way, to just be a person of trust and integrity. And I 100% believe in the law of reciprocation. Before I even read the book or knew that was a thing, I was raised in a small West Texas town, and my husband sometimes gets on to me that I go overboard and need to learn boundaries, but I'll help anybody with anything I can help with. And I think that always will return to me in one way or another. And like, I'm okay with that, so I can see where you guys have that same backbone of integrity and just treating people right. And I think those people will always be taken care of for that. So, okay, now we're going to end with a fun question. And this is just off the top of your head. If your life was a movie and every time you walked onto the scene, what would your theme song be whenever you walk onto the scene? Who wants to go first?
I think for me, it would be it wouldn't necessarily be the same artist singing the song, but the song would be Country Boy Can Survive.
What about you, Sheldon?
As I sit here right now, maybe thinking Back in Black by AC/DC.
Nice. All right. What about you, Bailey?
No, I'm really bad at these games. I'm thinking maybe the go-to off the top of my head seems fair is Run the World by Beyonce.
Nice. I'll tell you guys, I got this question on a podcast and I cheated, so I'm just going to out myself. I stopped listening to music like 5 years ago because I kept hearing the words in it and I'm like, man, who's writing this? Everybody's depressed. Everybody's like lost someone. They're destitute. And it just took too long to like curate a playlist. I'm like, forget it. Just turn it off. So really quickly, I like had my phone under my desk and I asked chat, my second brain, like, what would my theme song be? And she said, Run This City by Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Rihanna. And I was like, so I just said it because I'm like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, anything else. And later I went and listened to it and I'm like, I actually really love this song, even though I'm like, what in the world? So anyways, that was I cheated on mine. So you guys, hats off to you guys for answering it, because I was like, I have no idea. I don't listen to music anymore. Shoot, what would my theme song be? Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. I love the dynamic that we got to bring all three of you guys on. This is very rare that I've talked to second generation, but I've never got to have everybody in the room and really give this perspective. So thank you guys for coming. If you're in the Oklahoma City area and you need anything personal injury, you know who to call. And definitely check out the other interviews on this podcast that will help you grow your law firm and scale smarter, not harder. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.